At 11:47 on a rain-soaked Tuesday night, Nathan Walker threw his truck door open so hard the hinge screamed, splashed through 6 inches of flooded parking lot, and caught the most powerful woman in the city half a second before her knees hit the pavement. Victoria Harrington, the billionaire CEO, who fired vice presidents without blinking, was soaked shaking and sobbing his name into the collar of his work jacket. 12 hours later, she'd wake up on his couch, wearing his old gray shirt in an apartment smaller than her walk-in closet. But the reason she was wearing that shirt hid a secret that could destroy them both. Comment which city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels, and subscribe, because you won't want to miss a single part. The phone rang at 11:41 p.m., and Nathan Walker almost didn't answer it. He was standing at the kitchen counter of his apartment, still in his work clothes, packing a peanut butter sandwich into a plastic container for his daughter's lunch the next day. Cut the crusts off. She was 7. She still asked him to cut the crusts off, and someday she'd stop asking, so he did it every single time like it mattered, because to him it did. The phone buzzed against the counter. He glanced at the screen and frowned. Unknown number. Almost midnight. Nobody called Nathan Walker at midnight. Nobody called him much at all, honestly. His life didn't have the kind of people in it who called late. He had Lily asleep down the hall with her nightlight on. He had a supervisor named Frank who texted him about broken boilers. And he had a job, a good job, a job he'd fought to keep running maintenance at the Harrington Global Tower downtown, the kind of building where the lobby floor cost more than his truck. He almost let it ring out. Then something told him not to. He picked up. Hello? Silence. Breathing. The muffled sound of rain and traffic somewhere on the other end. Hello? He said again. Who is this? And then a voice small cracked, nothing like the voice he knew said, Mr. Walker. Nathan set the sandwich down. He knew that voice. He'd know that voice anywhere. He'd heard it slice a room in half. He'd heard it end careers in 4 words. He'd heard it say, this meeting is over, and watched grown men in $5,000 suits gather their papers and flee. But he had never in 3 years heard it sound like this. Ms. Harrington, he said carefully, a shaky breath. You remember me. Of course I remember you. He was already reaching for his boots. Are you okay? She laughed, but it wasn't a laugh, it was something breaking. No, she said. No, I don't think I am. Where are you? I don't. A pause. He heard her moving, heard the scrape of a chair. There's a restaurant. Le Bernardin, no. That's not, I don't know the name. It's on 5th. There's a red awning. I've been sitting here for 2 hours, and I can't call anyone Mr. Walker. Do you understand? There's nobody I can call. Nathan went still. Victoria Harrington ran a company worth $11 billion. She had a personal assistant, a driver, a security detail, a board of directors, 400 employees, a fiancé plastered across the business section of every newspaper in the country. She had more people than anyone Nathan had ever met, and she'd called the maintenance supervisor. I need you to come get me, she whispered. Please, I don't have anyone else. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask how she got his number, or where her driver was, or why a woman with everything was sitting alone in the corner of a restaurant at midnight, begging a man who fixed her building's air conditioning to come and take her home. He just said, Don't move, I'm on my way. He grabbed his jacket. Then he stopped. Lily. He couldn't leave her. He walked down the hall as quietly as he could and pushed the door open. She was asleep on her side, one arm thrown over the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2, her mouth open just slightly. 7 years old. The whole reason he got up in the morning. He couldn't take her out into the rain at midnight to go collect his drunk boss. And he couldn't leave her alone. He stood there for a long moment, jaw tight, running through the short, sad list of people he could call. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed the one name on it. Mrs. Alvarez, he said quietly when the old woman across the hall answered. I'm so sorry to call this late. I know it's yes. Yes, ma'am. Something's come up. A work thing. I hate to ask. Could you come sit with Lily just for an hour? Maybe 2. I'll leave the door unlocked. The old woman didn't hesitate. She'd raised 4 kids of her own and buried a husband, and she understood better than most what it meant when a good man asks for help at midnight. "Go," she said. "I'll be there in 2 minutes. Go on." Nathan drove too fast. He knew he was driving too fast, and he made himself ease off the gas twice, because a wreck wouldn't help anyone, but his hands wouldn't stop gripping the wheel like it might get away from him. The wipers couldn't keep up with the rain. The city smeared past his windows in streaks of red and gold. The whole way there, one thought circled his head like a bird that wouldn't land. She called me. 3 years he'd worked in that building. 3 years he'd nodded at her in the elevator when she happened to be in it, and she'd nodded back the way you nod at furniture that moves. He wasn't a person to her. He was a function. Cold air in summer, warm air in winter, the lights coming on when you flipped the switch. He was the man who made the invisible machinery of her empire keep running, and the whole point of a man like that was that you never had to think about him. Except he'd seen things. Little things. Things nobody else bothered to see, because nobody else was ever there when she thought she was alone. He'd seen her eat lunch by herself in that big glass office every single day, no matter who was in town, no matter what deal was on the table. Just her, and a salad, and the skyline. He'd seen her stay after everyone else had gone home working under a single lamp at 9, at 10, at 11, while the cleaning crew moved around her like she was a piece of the building. And once, just once, he'd been on a ladder in the corner of a conference room, fixing a vent forgotten invisible, and he'd watched her walk in, after a brutal meeting, close the door, sit down, and put her face in her hands. Her shoulders had shaken. Just for a minute. Then she'd wiped her eyes, straightened her jacket, and walked back out into her life like nothing had happened. Nathan had never told a soul. It hadn't felt like his to tell. The red awning came up on his right. He pulled to the curb, killed the engine, and was out of the truck before the door had finished swinging. She was inside in the far corner, exactly where she'd said, and for a moment he almost didn't recognize her. Victoria Harrington always looked like she'd been assembled by a team. Every hair in place, every line of her clothing sharp enough to cut. A woman built like a fortress. The woman in the corner had makeup running down her face. Her hair had come loose on one side. Her suit jacket was off, folded on the chair beside her, and she was gripping a water glass with both hands, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. There was a half-empty bottle of wine in front of her, and a check nobody had picked up. The restaurant was nearly empty. A waiter hovered near the kitchen door, clearly not sure what to do with the powerful woman who'd been crying in his section for 2 hours. Nathan crossed the room. She looked up when his shadow fell over the table, and something moved across her face, relief and shame, and something he didn't have a word for. "You came," she said. "I said I would." "People say things. I'm not people," he said, and he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "You okay?" She let out a broken little laugh and looked at the ceiling. "You keep asking me that." "I'll keep asking till you tell me the truth." Her eyes came back down to him, bloodshot, wet, but underneath it, sharp, the same eyes that had stared down half the boardrooms in the country. "No, Mr. Walker," she said. "I'm not okay. Is that what you want to hear?" "I don't want to hear anything," he said. "I want to get you home." He signaled the waiter, quietly asked for the check, and when the young man brought it, Nathan reached for his own wallet, because that's who he was. He'd have paid it and figured out the rest later. But Victoria's hand shot out and caught his wrist. "Don't you dare," she said. "Don't you dare pay for my dinner. That's the one thing I can still do." She dropped a black card on the tray without looking at it. When the waiter was gone, she stared down at her own hands like they belonged to a stranger. "Do you know what the worst part is?" she said quietly. "What's that?" "I don't drink." She laughed again, that same cracked sound. "Ask anyone. Victoria Harrington doesn't drink. I have 1 glass of champagne at the Christmas party and I nurse it for 3 hours. Control. That's the whole game, Mr. Walker. You control the room, you control the deal, you control yourself. Above all, you control yourself." Her voice dropped. "And tonight, I sat in this chair and drank an entire bottle of wine by myself, because I could not think of a single reason not to. Do you understand how frightening that is? For someone like me, Nathan didn't say anything. He'd learned a long time ago that most people who are hurting don't need you to talk. They need you to stay in the chair. Come on, he said gently. Let's get you up. He stood, came around the table and offered his hand. She looked at it for a moment. Then she took it, and he pulled her to her feet, and she swayed, and he steadied her without thinking, one hand under her elbow, the other at her back. I've got you, he said. The rain hadn't let up. When they stepped out under the awning, she stopped staring into it like it was a wall she couldn't cross. Wait here, Nathan said. He shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It swallowed her 3 sizes too big, still warm from his body, and then, before she could argue, he swept it up over her head like an umbrella. Ready on 3, 1, 2. They ran. He got her into the passenger seat, shut the door against the rain, jogged around and dropped in behind the wheel, soaked to the skin, breathing hard. Water ran off his hair and down his neck. He didn't care. She was staring at him. You're drenched, she said. I'll dry. You gave me your jacket. You needed it more. She kept staring at him, and something in her expression cracked open a little wider. Why are you being kind to me? She asked, and there was genuine confusion in it, like kindness was a foreign language she'd half forgotten. Nathan started the truck. Because you called, he said simply. And you sounded like somebody who needed a friend. We're not friends, she said. You work for me. Then think of it as overtime. And for the first time that night she laughed. A real one. Small and tired and surprised out of her, but real. Where am I taking you? He asked. She gave him an address on the Upper East Side, a building he knew by reputation, the kind of address where the doormen wore gloves. He pulled out into the rain. For a few blocks, she was quiet, watching the city slide by. Then, out of nowhere, she said, He humiliated me tonight. Nathan kept his eyes on the road. Who did? Adrian. She said the name like it tasted bad. Adrian Cole. My fiancé. She laughed again, but there was no humor in it now. The great Adrian Cole. You've probably read about him. Everyone's read about him. Forbes did a profile. The man who never loses. She turned her head and looked out the window. He brought clients to dinner tonight. Important clients, people I've been trying to bring into a deal for 8 months. My deal. Mr. Walker, my work. 8 months of my life. And I was in the middle of the pitch. I was 3 sentences from closing it, and he put his hand on my arm in front of all of them, and he smiled, and he said, her voice caught. He said, Why don't you let the professionals handle this, sweetheart? Nathan's hands tightened on the wheel. And they laughed. She went on quieter now. All of them. They laughed. Like it was funny. Like I was funny. And Adrian laughed the loudest, and he took the room from me. My room. My deal. And he closed it himself, and afterward, everyone shook his hand. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. And nobody. Not one person. Not one person at that table looked at me. It was like I'd disappeared. Like I'd never been there at all. Where'd he go? Nathan asked. After. He left with the clients. Drinks at some club. He didn't even... She stopped, swallowed. He didn't even ask if I was coming. He just left me sitting there. And you know the worst part, I sat there for an hour, telling myself he'd come back. That he'd realize, and he'd come back, and he'd say he was sorry. She laughed, and it broke apart in the middle. He didn't come back. Nobody came back. So I drank a bottle of wine, and I looked at my phone, and there wasn't a single name in it I could call. 400 people work for me. I know senators. I know movie stars. And there was not one human being on this earth I could call at midnight and say, I'm not okay. She turned and looked at him. Except a maintenance man whose number I only had because I signed off on his hire 3 years ago. Nathan drove in silence for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and even. Can I say something and you can tell me to shut up? You're the boss. Say it. That man's been doing this to you for a while, Nathan said. Hasn't he? Victoria went very still. You didn't get drunk over one dinner, he said. Nobody who's built what you've built falls apart over one bad night. That's not how strong people break. Strong people break slow. 100 little cuts, and every one of them so small, you talk yourself out of feeling it. He didn't mean it. He was tired. It was a joke. I'm being sensitive. He glanced at her. Am I close? Her eyes filled. She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. How long? He asked gently. 2 years, she whispered. And in 2 years, how many times has he made you feel small in front of other people? She was crying now silently, the tears just running down without a sound. He says it's love, she said. He says he's the only one who understands what it takes to be with someone like me. He says other men would be intimidated. He says I'm too much, and he's the only one strong enough to handle me, and I should be grateful because a woman like me, powerful, difficult, cold. That's the word everyone uses, cold. A woman like me doesn't get to be loved by just anyone. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. He says I need him, because nobody else could. Nathan pulled the truck over to the curb. He put it in park. He turned in his seat so he was facing her fully. And he waited until she looked at him. Listen to me, he said, because I'm only going to say this once, and then I'll take you home, and you never have to think about me again if you don't want to. You listening? She nodded, wiping her face. You don't need somebody who makes you smaller so they can feel bigger, Nathan said. That's not love. That's not strength. A man who's actually strong doesn't need to shrink the woman next to him. He's not scared of her being tall. He held her eyes. That man tells you you're too much because he's afraid you'll figure out he's not enough. And the day you figure that out, he loses you. So he makes sure you never figure it out. He keeps you looking down at your own feet so you never look up and see the door. Victoria stared at him. The tears had stopped. She was looking at him like she'd never actually seen him before, like the furniture had stood up and spoken. Who are you? She said quietly. Nobody, Nathan said. I fix your air conditioning. No. She shook her head slowly. No. Where does a maintenance man learn to say a thing like that? Nathan looked out the windshield at the rain for a long moment. I was married once, he said. Lily's mom. And I loved her. God, I loved her. He was quiet a beat. But she was the one making somebody small. Me. For a long time I let her because I thought that's what love cost. I thought if I just got smaller and quieter and easier one day, I'd be small enough that she'd finally be happy. He gave a short, hard breath through his nose. You can't get small enough. There's no bottom to it. Whatever they need you to shrink to, it's always one size less than what you are. He turned to look at her. She left when Lily was 2. Best thing that ever happened to me, and it took me a year to understand that. A pause. So no, I'm not a smart man, Ms. Harrington. But some things you don't learn from a book. You learn them on the floor. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The rain drummed on the roof. Victoria, she said finally. What? My name. It's Victoria. If you're going to tell me true things at 1 a.m, you can stop calling me Ms. Harrington. Nathan almost smiled. Okay, he said. Victoria. He pulled back out into the street. When they reached her building, the doorman came out under a large black umbrella, saw who it was, and his professional face flickered with something surprise, maybe at the state of her, or at the mud-splattered pickup truck idling under the awning where the Bentleys and Teslas usually sat. Victoria didn't move to get out. She sat there with Nathan's jacket still around her shoulders, looking up at the glass tower where she lived. I don't want to go up there, she said. Nathan looked at her. There's nothing up there, she said. Do you understand 9,000 square feet and there's nothing in it? It's beautiful. It was in a magazine. And it's empty. I go up there and it's like walking into a hotel where the guest never checked in. Her hands twisted in her lap. His things are up there. His clothes, his stupid awards. And I know if I go up there in the morning, I'll have talked myself out of everything you just said. I'll wake up and I'll think he was just tired. It was just a joke, I'm being sensitive. And I'll call him and I'll apologize." She pressed her lips together. "I always apologize. Do you know that I always end up being the one who says sorry?" The doorman tapped politely on the window. Victoria didn't look at him. She looked at Nathan. And Nathan, who had one simple rule: keep your head down, work hard, never mix your personal life with your job, sat there in the rain and felt that rule crack straight down the middle. He should take her up the stairs, hand her off to the doorman, go home to his daughter. That was the smart thing. That was the safe thing. That was the thing that kept his job and his life, and the careful walls he'd built around both. Instead, he heard himself say, "I've got a couch." Victoria blinked. "What? It's not much," Nathan said quickly, already regretting it, already unable to stop. "It's a 2-bedroom in Queens. My daughter's asleep. Look, it's nothing like this. It's small and it's old, and the radiator makes a noise all night. But there's coffee in the morning, and there's a kid who'll be very confused to find a stranger in the living room, and there's nobody up there who's going to make you apologize for anything." He shrugged, uncomfortable, honest. "If you don't want to be alone, you don't have to be. That's all I'm saying. No strings, just a couch." The doorman tapped again. Victoria looked at Nathan for a long, long moment. Then she turned to the window, rolled it down 2 inches, and said in the clear, unmistakable voice of a woman who ran an empire, "Thank you, Gerald. I won't be needing the apartment tonight. Go back inside where it's dry." She rolled the window up. She looked at Nathan. "Drive," she said. The apartment in Queens was exactly what he'd promised. Small, old, warm. Mrs. Alvarez was dozing in the armchair with the television murmuring, and she woke when the key turned and took one look at the woman coming through the door in a man's work jacket with mascara on her cheeks, and bless her asked, no questions at all. She just squeezed Nathan's arm on her way out and whispered, "There's leftover soup on the stove. She looks like she could use it." Then she was gone, and it was just the 2 of them and the radiator ticking, and the sound of a child breathing down the hall. Victoria stood in the middle of the little living room and turned in a slow circle, taking it in. The old plaid couch, the coffee table with a ring stain nobody had ever managed to get out, the bookshelf with more of Lily's picture books than his, and the refrigerator. She walked to it slowly, the refrigerator absolutely covered in a child's drawings. Crayon suns with faces. A stick figure man with a stick figure girl holding hands under a wobbly rainbow. A card that said, "Datey" in enormous, unsteady letters, the L missing entirely. Victoria stood in front of that refrigerator, and Nathan watched something come apart in her very quietly. "She made this," she said. "Every week there's a new one. I run out of magnets." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You want some soup? Mrs. Alvarez'll haunt me if you don't eat it." Victoria didn't turn around. She was still looking at the drawings. "In my whole life," she said, "I have never once had anything like this on my refrigerator." Nathan didn't know what to say to that, so he heated the soup. She ate it at the little kitchen table, both hands around the bowl. And it was the strangest thing. This woman he'd seen, command rooms full of the most powerful people in the country, sitting in his kitchen in a jacket that swallowed her eating chicken soup like she hadn't eaten in a week. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe you could have everything and forget to eat. "Your dress is soaked through," Nathan said, noticing. "You'll catch cold. Hang on." He went to his room and came back with an old gray t-shirt, soft and washed thin from 100 cycles, faded lettering across the chest from a hardware store that had closed years ago. He set it on the table beside her. "Bathroom's down the hall," he said. "There's clean towels under the sink. I'll put your dress on the radiator. It'll be dry by morning." Victoria picked up the shirt and looked at it. Something crossed her face that he couldn't read. "You're just going to hand me a shirt," she said, "and put me on your couch, and that's it. That's it. You don't want anything." Nathan met her eyes steadily. "Victoria," he said, "I've got a 7-year-old asleep in the next room, and a woman in my kitchen who's had the worst night of her life. What kind of man do you think I am?" She looked at him for a long moment. "I don't know," she said quietly. "That's the problem. I've never met one like you before. I keep waiting for the catch." "No catch," Nathan said. "Go put on the shirt. Get some sleep." She changed in the bathroom. When she came out in his old gray t-shirt, hair down, face scrubbed clean of the ruined makeup, no armor left at all, she looked 10 years younger and about 100 times more human, and Nathan had to look away because it wasn't his to look at. He'd made up the couch with sheets and the good blanket. She stood beside it, suddenly awkward, this titan of industry, unsure how to lie down on a stranger's sofa. "Nathan," she said. "Yeah." "Thank you." She swallowed. I'm not good at this. Saying things like this. I run a company. I don't thank you. For coming. For all of it. I won't forget it." "Get some sleep," he said gently. "Everything's smaller in the morning." He turned off the lamp. He went to the hallway, and then her voice, small in the dark, stopped him. "He'll call in the morning," she said. "Adrian. He always calls the next day once he's decided I've had enough time to feel bad. And he'll be charming, and he'll be sorry, and he'll make me feel like I imagined the whole thing. He's very good at it." A pause. How do I not answer when it rings? How do I just not answer? Nathan stood in the dark hallway for a moment. "You don't have to figure that out tonight," he said. "Tonight, all you have to do is sleep. Tomorrow, when it rings, you look at your refrigerator, not yours. Think about the one in there, the drawings, the datey with no L." He heard her breath catch. "And you ask yourself if the man who's calling would ever in a million years put your drawing on his refrigerator. And if the answer's no, you let it ring." Silence. Then so quiet, he almost missed it. "Good night, Nathan." "Good night, Victoria?" He didn't sleep much. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the radiator tick, and the rain finally taper off, and he did the math on what he'd done. There was a billionaire on his couch, his boss, the woman who signed the checks that paid for the peanut butter and the crayons and the roof over his daughter's head. If this went wrong, if this got twisted, if the wrong person heard about it, he could lose everything. He knew that. He'd known it in the truck, and he'd known it at her building, and he'd done it anyway. He thought about that. About why he'd done it anyway. And somewhere around 3 in the morning, lying there in the dark, Nathan Walker admitted something to himself that he'd been refusing to admit for a long time, longer than tonight, longer than he wanted to count. He cared about her. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, her. The woman who ate lunch alone. The woman whose hands shook after meetings. The woman who'd cried in an empty conference room and thought nobody saw. He'd seen. For 3 years he'd seen. And he'd told himself it was nothing, that a man like him had no business caring about a woman like that the whole idea was so far outside the lines of his life, it wasn't even worth the ache. He'd been lying to himself. He rolled over and made himself stop thinking about it, because nothing good could come from it, and Lily needed breakfast in a few hours, and the whole thing would surely evaporate with the sunrise. Victoria Harrington would wake up, put on her dry dress, remember who she was and who he was, and walk back out of his life through the same door she'd come in. That was how these things went. The rich went back to being rich. The invisible went back to being invisible. He fell asleep, telling himself that. He woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of his daughter's voice. For one confused second, he lay there because Lily didn't make coffee. Lily couldn't reach the machine. Then he remembered, and he was up and moving before he'd finished the thought. He came into the kitchen and stopped in the doorway. Victoria Harrington, CEO of Harrington Global, worth $11 billion, feared across 2 continents, was sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor in his old gray t-shirt, hair a mess, holding a purple crayon, hunched in fierce concentration over a piece of construction paper. And across from her equally serious tongue, poking out of the corner of her mouth, sat Lily. "No, see, you have to press harder." Lily was instructing her, or it comes out too light and it doesn't count. Like this? Better. You're getting better. There was fresh coffee in the pot. Someone had figured out his ancient machine. There were 2 mugs out, one already poured, and waiting on the counter, still steaming exactly the way he took it. He had no idea how she knew. Maybe she'd just guessed. Maybe she'd looked. Victoria glanced up and saw him in the doorway, and for just a second, the old mask flickered up. Caught exposed. Defenseless, a powerful woman found sitting on a stranger's floor coloring with a child. Then Lily looked up too and said, "Daddy, your friend is really bad at coloring, but she's trying really hard, so I'm teaching her." And Victoria Harrington laughed. Not the broken laugh from the restaurant, not the tired one from the truck. A real helpless, surprised, unguarded laugh. Head tipped back and it changed her whole face, and Nathan stood in the doorway of his own kitchen holding onto the frame. Because for the first time in 3 years, he was looking at the woman behind the woman, and she was sitting on his floor in his shirt laughing with his daughter. And he understood with a sudden terrifying clarity that his careful, small, safe life had just ended, and that some part of him was glad. "Morning," he managed. "Morning," Victoria said, still smiling, and she held up her drawing, a lopsided orange cat, or possibly a dog. It was genuinely impossible to tell. "Your daughter says it's a masterpiece." "I said it's okay," Lily corrected. "For a beginner." And then on the counter beside Nathan, Victoria's phone lit up. It buzzed against the tile loud in the small kitchen. The screen glowed. Adrian Mobile. Everything stopped. Lily kept coloring, but Victoria went still on the floor. The smile drained off her face. Her eyes went to the phone, and Nathan watched 2 years of 100 small cuts rise up in her, all at once, the pull of it, the habit, the old worn groove of just answer, just apologize, just make it stop. The phone buzzed again. Victoria didn't move. She didn't look at Nathan. She looked at the refrigerator, at the crayon suns, at the stick figure man holding the stick figure girl's hand at Daddy with no L. She looked at it for a long, long moment, while the phone buzzed a 3rd time in her hand's reach. Then she looked down at the lopsided orange cat in her lap, and at the little girl across from her waiting for her to finish, and Victoria Harrington set her jaw, picked her crayon back up, and turned the phone face down on the tile without answering it. "Okay," she said to Lily, and her voice only shook a little. "Show me again. Press harder," you said. "Press harder," Lily confirmed. The phone buzzed one final time against the floor and went dark. And Nathan, standing in the doorway of his kitchen with the coffee she'd made him, going cold in his hand, knew that whatever this was, whatever it cost him, there was no going back to before. The phone stayed face down on the tile for exactly 11 minutes before it started buzzing again, and this time, Victoria picked it up. Nathan, working eggs in a pan at the stove, went still. He didn't turn around. He'd promised her no strings, and part of that promise meant not hovering, not watching her like she might make the wrong choice. But every muscle in his back tightened. "He'll leave a message if I don't," Victoria said quietly, mostly to herself. "And then he'll leave another. And then he'll start calling people. My assistant, the office. He'll make it a whole—" She stopped, turned the phone over, looked at the screen. 4 missed calls now. A text preview she didn't open. "I have to at least tell him I'm alive, or he'll send someone to the apartment." "You don't owe him proof of life," Nathan said, still not turning around. "No," she agreed. "But I owe myself not having security do a welfare check and finding I never came home." She stood up from the floor, smoothing the old gray shirt down over her thighs, and Lily looked up at her. "Are you leaving?" Lily asked. Victoria looked down at the little girl, and something in her softened and hurt at the same time. "I have to make a phone call, sweetheart, in the other room, just for a minute. Okay?" Lily went back to her drawing, unbothered the way 7-year-olds are unbothered by things that are quietly enormous. "But then, can we finish the cat?" "Then we'll finish the cat," Victoria said. "I promise." She walked down the hall toward the bathroom, phone in her hand, and Nathan heard the door click shut. He plated the eggs. He put bread in the toaster. He poured Lily her juice. And the whole time he strained to hear and heard nothing but the low murmur of a voice through the wall, rising and falling, too muffled to make out. "Daddy," Lily said, "why is your friend sad?" Nathan crouched down to her level. "What makes you think she's sad, Bug? She has sad eyes," Lily said simply. "Even when she laughs. My teacher has happy eyes. Mrs. Alvarez has happy eyes. Your friend has sad eyes. She's pretty, but she's sad." Lily considered her cat. "Is somebody mean to her?" Nathan looked at his daughter for a long moment. 7 years old, and she saw it in one morning, the thing 400 employees and a board of directors and a whole city of people who feared her had never once bothered to see. "Yeah, Bug," he said quietly. "I think somebody's been mean to her." "That's not nice." "No," Nathan said. "It's not. You should tell them to stop." Nathan almost laughed, except it wasn't funny. "It's not that simple, sweetheart. When you're a grown-up, sometimes the person being mean is hard to get away from." Lily frowned, working through this with the terrible clarity of a child. "But she can just leave. If somebody's mean, you leave. That's the rule. You told me that. You said if a kid at school is mean, I don't have to stay and play with them." "I did say that. So why doesn't she leave?" Nathan didn't have an answer that a 7-year-old could hold, so he just kissed the top of her head and said, "Eat your eggs before they get cold." Down the hall, the voice had changed. It had gone quiet, not the quiet of the call being over, but the quiet of someone being talked over. Nathan knew that quiet. He'd lived in that quiet for years of his marriage. It was the sound of a person going small. He set his jaw and made himself stay by the stove. Behind the bathroom door, Victoria stood with her back against the cold tile and the phone pressed to her ear, and Adrian's voice poured through it like warm honey with a razor in it. "And I've been worried sick, Vic. Sick. I called the apartment 3 times. Gerald said you never came home. Do you have any idea what that does to me? I'm standing here imagining you in a ditch somewhere, and where are you? Where did you even go?" "I stayed with a friend," Victoria said. A pause. "A friend." The word came back flat, faintly amused, the way you'd repeat a child's obvious lie. "Vic, come on. You don't have friends. You have me." A soft laugh. "That's not an insult, baby, that's who you are. You've never needed anybody but me. So let's not do the whole mysterious thing. Where are you? I'll send the car." And there it was. Nathan had told her in the truck in the rain. He keeps you looking down at your own feet, so you never look up and see the door. She'd thought it was a beautiful thing to say. Now she was living it in real time, and she could feel the pull of it, the current of it, the way Adrian's voice reached into her and found the old handle and turned it. "You don't have friends. You have me." 12 hours ago she'd have believed him. "Adrian," she said, "you left me at the restaurant." "Oh, here we go." "You left me at the restaurant, in front of the Kellermans. You took my deal and you closed it yourself, and then you left with them for drinks, and you didn't ask if I was coming. I sat there for 2 hours. Because you were embarrassing yourself, Vic." The warmth snapped off like a switch, and there was the razor. "You want to have this conversation? Fine. Let's have it. You were floundering. You lost the thread of your own pitch. The Kellermans were checking their watches, and I stepped in and I saved it. I saved your deal. You should be thanking me. And instead, you make a scene, you disappear all night, you scare me half to death, and now you're what? Blaming me for your bad night." He exhaled long and disappointed. "This is what I'm talking about. This is the thing we've talked about. You get like this. You get emotional, and you rewrite what happened, so you're the victim. It's not attractive, Vic. It's exhausting." And Victoria opened her mouth to say, "I'm sorry." She felt it coming up her throat, the reflex, the old worn groove. "I'm sorry, you're right. I don't know what got into me. I'm sorry." It was right there. It would end the call. It would make the discomfort stop. 2 years of muscle memory, pulling her mouth into the shape of an apology she didn't owe. And through the door faintly, she heard Lily laugh at something. A bright, easy 7-year-old laugh. And Victoria looked at herself in the mirror over the sink. Hair a mess, no makeup, wearing a maintenance man's old t-shirt in a 2-bedroom in Queens. And she did not recognize the woman, looking back, and for the first time in a long time, That was a good thing. No, she said. Silence on the line. What? No, I'm not going to apologize. Her voice was shaking, but she kept going the way you keep walking on a bridge you're terrified of because stopping is worse. You humiliated me in front of clients I spent 8 months courting. And when I was hurt by it, you left me alone. And now you're telling me it's my fault, and you're telling me I have no friends, and you're telling me I'm exhausting and Adrian. Adrian, I've been letting you tell me things like that for 2 years, and this morning I woke up and I realized I don't have to believe you anymore. Victoria. His voice went dangerous and low. You are drunk, or you are hysterical, or someone has gotten in your ear, and I want you to stop and think very carefully about what you're doing right now, because you say things like this, and you can't unsay them. I know, she said. We have a wedding. We have 400 people invited. We have vendors. We have... I know. Your board loves me. Your investors love me. You want to blow up the best thing that ever. Adrian, she said, the engagement's off. She heard him breathe. She could picture his face perfectly, the disbelief, the calculation, the switch already flipping from charm to threat, because charm hadn't worked. You're going to regret this, he said, and every trace of honey was gone now. You have no idea. You think you're strong, but you're the most fragile person I've ever met, and without me holding you together, you are going to fall apart, and everyone is going to see it, and when you come crawling back, and you will, I might not be here. A pause. Who is he? Victoria's stomach dropped. What? The friend. You've never in your life spent a night away from home. Suddenly you're staying with a friend, and you've found the spine to leave me. Somebody's talking to you. Who is it? Because whoever he is, he doesn't know you, like I know you, and when he finds out what you're really like, he'll leave too, and then it'll be just you in that empty apartment, and you'll wish... Victoria hung up. She stood there with the phone in her hand, breathing hard, her heart slamming against her ribs like she'd run a mile. Then it started buzzing again immediately in her palm. Adrian lighting up the screen, and she watched it ring, and she didn't answer, and it went to voicemail, and it started ringing again. She turned it off, all the way off. Held the button until the screen went black, and then Victoria Harrington, who had not cried in front of another living soul in years until last night, sat down on the edge of the bathtub in a stranger's home and put her face in her hands and shook. Not from sadness, from something closer to terror, and underneath the terror so unfamiliar, she almost didn't know its name, something that felt like freedom. When she came out some minutes later, her eyes were red, but her face was composed. Nathan looked up from the table where he was eating eggs with Lily, and he didn't ask. He just nudged the chair out with his foot. Eggs are still warm, he said. Barely. Lily insisted we not wait for you, but she's a soft touch. She saved you the good piece of toast. I did, Lily confirmed. It's the corner one. The corner one is the best because it has the most edges. Victoria sat down. She looked at the plate. She looked at the corner piece of toast a 7-year-old had saved for her, and her chin trembled just once before she got it under control. Thank you, Lily, she said. That's very generous. You're welcome. Did you finish being sad on the phone? Lily, Nathan warned. It's all right, Victoria said. She looked at the little girl. Yes, I think I did. I think I finished being sad on the phone. I did something a little scary, but I think it was the right thing. Scary like a spider or scary like the dark? Victoria considered this seriously. Scary like jumping off the high diving board, she said. When you know the water's fine, but it's a long way down and your body doesn't want to. Lily nodded, deeply satisfied with this answer. I did that once, at the pool. I stood up there for like 100 years, and Daddy said I didn't have to, but I did it anyway, and then it was fun, and I did it 11 more times. That's very brave. You just have to not think about it, Lily advised. If you think about it, you can't do it. You have to just go. Victoria looked at Nathan over the child's head, and something passed between them, and Nathan had to look back down at his eggs. They ate. It was, Nathan thought, the strangest and best breakfast of his life. His kitchen, his kid, and the most powerful woman in the city eating saved toast in his old shirt and asking Lily about the diving board. He kept waiting for it to feel wrong, for the sheer impossibility of it to come crashing down, and it didn't. It felt, God help him, like something that fit. Afterward, Lily went to get dressed for the Saturday soccer she had at 10, and Nathan cleared the plates, and Victoria stood by the window with a fresh cup of coffee, and the mood shifted. The child was out of the room, and the adults were left with the size of what had happened. I ended it, Victoria said. The engagement, just now, on your bathroom floor essentially. She laughed without much humor. 2 years, and I ended it sitting on the edge of your bathtub. That's not how I imagined it, if I ever imagined it at all. Nathan dried his hands on a dish towel. How do you feel? Terrified. She said it immediately, no performance. He said things about how I'll fall apart without him, about how everyone will see, about how I'll come crawling back. She wrapped both hands around the coffee mug. And the terrible thing, Nathan, is that a part of me believes him. 2 years of hearing you're nothing without me, and it gets in. It gets under the skin. I can know it's a lie and still feel it's true. Does that make sense? More than you'd think, Nathan said. He asked who you were. Nathan went still. What? He knew there was someone. He could hear it in my voice that someone had talked to me, said things to me, and he asked who. She turned from the window to look at him. I didn't tell him, but he'll find out, Nathan. That's what he does. He's not a stupid man. He'll pull the doorman's log. He'll see a maintenance truck. He'll ask Gerald who dropped me off, and Gerald saw your face. Her jaw tightened. I've made a mess, and I've dragged you into the middle of it, and you have a daughter and a job, and She set the coffee down. I should never have called you last night. It was selfish. I was drowning, and I grabbed the nearest hand, and I didn't think about whose hand it was. Hey. Nathan crossed the kitchen, stopped a respectful distance away. Look at me. You didn't drag me anywhere. I didn't walk on my own. I offered the couch. Nobody made me. I'm a grown man, Victoria. I make my own decisions, and I don't regret a single one from last night. You could lose your job. Then I'll lose my job. You can't be serious. She stared at him. You have a child. Do you understand what a word from Adrian could do? He knows people. He knows everyone. He could make sure you never work in a building like mine again. He could... Victoria. Nathan's voice was quiet and absolutely steady. I've been poor before. I've been scared before. I raised a baby by myself on a maintenance salary while her mother was off God knows where, and I figured it out, and we ate, and she got her shots, and there were Christmas presents under the tree, even the year I was pulling doubles to cover them. So don't stand in my kitchen and tell me what I can survive. I know exactly what I can survive. He held her eyes. What I couldn't survive is looking myself in the mirror if I'd left you crying in that restaurant because I was worried about my job. That man I couldn't live with. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and there was something almost like grief in her face. The grief of a person realizing too late what they'd been settling for, because they were finally standing next to the real thing and could see the difference. You keep saying things, she said softly, and every one of them is the exact opposite of what I've been told love is supposed to sound like. I didn't say anything about love. No, she agreed. You didn't. And she picked her coffee back up, and the moment stretched, and neither of them knew what to do with it. And mercifully, Lily thundered back into the room in her soccer jersey with her shin guards on the wrong legs. Daddy, we're gonna be late. We're gonna be so late. Coach says if you're late, you don't start. We're not gonna be late. Bug shine guards are backwards. Come here. And the enormous thing between the adults folded itself up and got put away because a child needed her. Shin guards fixed. And that was the rhythm of Nathan's life. The way the profound and the mundane braided together, the way you could be in the middle of the most important conversation of your life and still have to tie a small shoe. Victoria's coming to your game, Lily announced, apparently having decided this. Right, you can come to my game. I'm a striker. That means I'm the one who scores. I scored last week, 2 times. Victoria opened her mouth to make an excuse. A graceful one. She had 100 of them, meetings and calls and obligations, the machinery of a life, built to have no gaps in it. And then she looked at the little girl's face, open and hopeful. And she looked at the drawings on the refrigerator, and she thought about her calendar. Blessedly, terrifyingly empty, now that she'd blown up the only relationship in it, and she heard herself say, "I would love to come to your game," Lily whooped. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to," he said quietly under the child's celebration. "She'll forget she asked in 10 minutes. "I know I don't have to." Victoria set down her coffee. "That's rather the point, isn't it? I've spent my whole life doing things I have to do." She looked at him. "Can I borrow something to wear? I can't very well show up to a children's soccer game in a cocktail dress. Or your shirt, though, I'm growing fond of it." Nathan found her a pair of Lily's mother's old sweatpants that had been in a box in the closet for 5 years, and a hooded sweatshirt of his own. And Victoria Harrington walked out of that apartment in borrowed clothes with her hair in a ponytail. And if the neighbors had known that the woman climbing into the mud-splattered pickup was worth $11 billion, not one of them would have believed it. The soccer game was at a public park with chain-link fences and dented goals and a snack table run by 2 exhausted mothers. Nathan set up a folding chair for Victoria on the sideline, and she sat in it in her borrowed sweats, and she watched a pack of 7-year-olds chase a ball in a swarm. And Lily, true to her word, was a striker, which mostly meant she stood near the goal and shrieked encouragement. "She's not actually very good," Nathan said, sitting down beside Victoria. "Don't tell her I said that." "She's magnificent," Victoria said, and she meant it, watching Lily wave both arms over her head at nobody in particular. "Look at her. She's completely unafraid. Do you know what I'd give to be that unafraid?" "You hung up on Adrian Cole this morning," Nathan pointed out. "That's a fair bit of unafraid." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" "Course. I built the entire company out of fear." She kept her eyes on the field. "Everyone thinks it was ambition, vision, all the words they put in the magazine profiles. It wasn't. It was fear. My father lost everything when I was 12. A bad partnership, a man he trusted, who ruined him, and we went from a house to an apartment to my mother's sister's spare room. And I watched my father, who had been this huge, confident, laughing man, become small, ashamed. He'd flinch when the phone rang. He died when I was 19. And I think it was really the shame that killed him slowly over years." Her hands were tight in her lap. "And I decided I was maybe 15 when I decided this, that no one would ever be able to do to me what that man did to my father. That I would be so powerful, so untouchable, so completely in control, that I could never be made small. That's not vision, Nathan. That's a scared little girl building a fortress and calling it an empire." Nathan didn't say anything for a moment. On the field, the ball squirted loose and a dozen children ran after it in a clump. "And then you built the fortress," he said. "And you let a man move into it who spent 2 years making you small anyway, from the inside." Victoria closed her eyes. "Yes." "Because a fortress keeps out the enemies at the gate," Nathan said slowly. "But it doesn't do a thing about the one you invite in and hand the keys." She turned and looked at him, and her eyes were wet again. "How do you do that? How do you just see it, see straight through to the middle of a thing?" Nathan shrugged, uncomfortable with it. "I've had a lot of quiet years. When you're the guy nobody notices, you spend a lot of time watching. You learn to read a room because nobody's talking to you, so all you've got is watching." He kept his eyes on the field. "I've watched you for 3 years, Victoria. From the corner. Up a ladder. Behind a cart. I saw the lunches alone and the late nights and the way your hands shook after the hard meetings when you thought the room was empty. I didn't have a name for it. I just knew the loneliest person in that whole building was the one at the top." Victoria stared at him. "You saw that," she said. "For 3 years you saw that, and you never—" She stopped. "Everyone in that building would kill to have a private conversation with me. You had 100 of them in a way. You watched me be human when I thought no one was looking, and you never once used it. Never came to my office with a favor, never leveraged it, never even mentioned it. Wasn't mine to use, Nathan said simply. A person crying when they think they're alone, that's the most private thing there is. You don't do anything with that except keep it safe. And Victoria Harrington understood, sitting in a folding chair at a children's soccer game in borrowed sweatpants, that she had spent 2 years with a man who used every vulnerability against her, and had spent one night with a man who'd been quietly guarding hers for 3 years without ever telling her. And the difference between those two things was the difference between everything she'd had and everything she'd wanted. Goal! Lily's voice split the air. Daddy, I scored. Did you see? Did you see it? I saw it, Bug. Nathan was on his feet, hollering both arms up. That was incredible. That was the best goal I've ever seen in my life. Victoria stood too, without deciding to, and found herself cheering for a 7-year-old she'd met 12 hours ago, cheering with her whole chest. And Lily looked over at the sideline and saw them both standing there yelling for her. And her face. Nathan would remember it for the rest of his life. And so it turned out, would Victoria. Her face lit up like the whole sun had come out just for her. After the game over juice boxes and orange slices, Lily hurled herself at Victoria and hugged her around the waist, sweaty and triumphant. And Victoria froze for a second, the way people freeze when they're not used to being hugged. And then she carefully put her arms around the little girl and hugged her back. And over the top of Lily's head, she looked at Nathan with an expression he couldn't name and didn't try to. That should have been the end of it. A strange, perfect, impossible day, and then Monday would come, and Victoria would go back to her tower and her billions, and Nathan would go back to his ladders and his carts, and they'd nod at each other in the elevator, and this whole thing would become a story neither of them ever told anybody. That's what should have happened. It didn't, because as they were walking back to the truck, Lily skipping ahead. Victoria's turned-off phone had nothing to do with it, but Nathan's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Frowned. It's Frank, my supervisor. He answered. Frank, hey, it's Saturday, what's... And then his face changed. Nathan went very still, and Victoria, watching, felt her stomach drop because she knew that stillness she'd felt it herself an hour ago in the bathroom. Say that again, Nathan said quietly. Slow. He listened. His jaw worked. His eyes came up and found Victoria's, and there was something in them now. Something careful and grim. Who told you to call me on a Saturday to tell me that Frank... A pause. No, I'm asking you a real question. Somebody told you to make this call today. Who was it? Another pause. Nathan's knuckles went white around the phone. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. No, I'm not mad at you, Frank. You're just the messenger. Monday, I understand. He hung up. Lily was 10 feet ahead, spinning in a circle with her arms out, singing to herself, gloriously unaware. Nathan? Victoria said. What was that? That, Nathan said, was my supervisor calling on a Saturday, which he has never done in 3 years, to tell me that there's been a complaint. That I've been seen behaving inappropriately with a member of executive leadership. That there's going to be a review Monday morning. And that until the review, I'm suspended without pay. He looked at her. And when I asked him who told him to make the call today on a Saturday before I'd even been back to work, he got real quiet. And then he said the request came down from outside the building, from a name he wasn't supposed to say. The color had drained out of Victoria's face. Adrian. He works fast, Nathan said. Give him that. It's not even been 3 hours since you hung up on him, and he's already found the maintenance truck, already found my name, already made a phone call to the one thing he figured he could take from me. Nathan looked at his daughter spinning in the parking lot, and his voice went very low and very hard. He wants to make me small, Victoria. That's the game, right? That's the whole game. Make the man small. Show you what happens to people who get in your ear. Victoria's hands had curled into fists at her sides. The terror from the bathroom was gone. Something else had replaced it, something colder and older and much more dangerous. The scared little girl who'd built a fortress was gone, and standing in the parking lot in borrowed sweatpants was the woman who'd built an $11 billion empire, and Nathan watched it happen, watched her rise up into her full and terrible height right there, between the dented goals and the snack table. "He suspended you," she said. Her voice had changed completely. It was the voice from the boardroom, the voice that ended careers. "He made a phone call to my building, to my staff, about my employee, without my authorization." She turned and looked at Nathan, and her eyes were bright and hard as struck flint. "He thinks he still has that power. He thinks the engagement being over changes nothing because he spent 2 years teaching me that his word carries in my company." A slow, cold breath. He's about to learn how wrong he is. "Victoria, get Lily home," Victoria said, already pulling her dead phone out of her pocket and holding down the power button, watching it come back to life with 100 waiting notifications. "Get her home, get her fed, and don't worry about Monday." The phone lit up. She was already scrolling, already dialing the fortress fully manned. Now every gun turned outward, for the first time in 2 years, not to protect herself. Nathan realized, but to protect him and his daughter. "Nathan, look at me." He looked at her. "You stood between me and the rain last night," Victoria said. "You gave me your jacket, you gave me your couch, and your shirt, and your daughter's saved toast, and you asked for nothing. So now you're going to let me do one thing for you, and you're not going to argue because I am very, very good at exactly one thing in this world, and that thing is winning." She put the phone to her ear. It was ringing. "Adrian Cole just made the worst business decision of his life. He picked a fight on my territory, and I am done being made small." The line connected. Victoria Harrington's voice went smooth as glass and twice as sharp. "Marcus," she said. "It's Victoria. I'm sorry to call you on a Saturday. I need you to pull every document related to Adrian Cole's involvement with Harrington Global, and I need the board on a call by Monday at 8 a.m. A pause. "Yes, all of it. And Marcus cancel the wedding vendors. Every one. Personally." Another pause. She was watching Nathan the whole time, and something in her face was fierce and bright and absolutely certain. "No, I'm not upset. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus, I'm thinking perfectly clearly." Marcus Webb had been Victoria Harrington's chief counsel for 9 years, and in 9 years, he had learned to read the exact temperature of her voice, the way a sailor reads the sky. So when she called him on a Saturday afternoon and asked for every document related to Adrian Cole and the board on a call by Monday, he didn't ask why. He asked one question. "Victoria," he said carefully, "are you telling me the engagement is over, or are you telling me something bigger than that?" "Both," she said. "Pull the documents, Marcus. All of them. And I want you to do it quietly. If Adrian gets a whiff that we're looking, he'll start covering ground, and I don't want to give him the weekend." There was a long pause on the line. Nathan, standing in the parking lot with Lily, now clinging to his leg, watched Victoria's face and couldn't read it. "There's something you should know," Marcus said finally. "And I've wanted to say it for about 18 months, and every time I got close, you shut me down, so I let it go, and that was a mistake, and I'll own that. But I'm going to say it now." He took a breath. Adrian's involvement with the company was never as clean as he made it look. "When you two got engaged and you brought him onto the advisory side, I flagged 3 things. You told me to drop it. You said I was being paranoid. You said he was going to be your husband, and I needed to trust him." Victoria closed her eyes. "What 3 things, Marcus?" "Not on a cell phone in a parking lot," Marcus said. "But bring yourself in tomorrow, Sunday. Quiet building. And Victoria." His voice softened, and Nathan watched something flicker across her face. "For what it's worth, I'm glad. Whatever changed your mind this weekend? I've watched that man make you smaller for 2 years, and I couldn't say a word about it because it wasn't my place, and it's been killing me. So whatever happened, I'm glad." Victoria's throat worked. "Something happened," she said quietly, and she looked at Nathan when she said it. "I'll tell you tomorrow, or I won't. But something happened." She hung up. She stood in the parking lot for a moment, the phone loose in her hand, and the fierce boardroom energy that had risen up in her cracked just slightly, and underneath it, Nathan could see how tired she was, how much this was costing her under all the steel. "Come on," he said gently. You heard the man. Nothing happens today. And there's a 7-year-old who needs lunch and a nap. And honestly, so do you. I don't nap. You drank a bottle of wine last night, and you've been running on adrenaline and my terrible coffee since 6 a.m. You'll nap. She almost smiled. Are you managing me, Nathan Walker? Somebody's got to, he said. You clearly haven't let anybody try in years. They drove back to Queens. Lily fell asleep in her car seat within 4 blocks, the way kids do, dropping into unconsciousness mid-sentence, and the truck went quiet, and Victoria watched the burro slide by and finally said the thing that had been sitting on her chest. He's going to come after you harder now, she said. You understand that. The suspension was him testing the water, seeing if he could still reach into my company and pull a lever. When he finds out I'm turning the whole machine against him, he's going to stop being subtle. And the easiest target he has isn't me. It's you. A single father. A maintenance salary. No lawyers, no board, no leverage. She turned to look at him. I did this to you. I let a man into my life who does this, and now he's aiming at you, and you have a little girl asleep in the back seat. Victoria. Nathan kept his eyes on the road. Stop apologizing for what he does. That's his to carry, not yours. A pause. But I'll be straight with you because you're being straight with me. Yeah. I'm scared. Not for me. I can lose a job. I've lost jobs. I'll find another. He glanced in the mirror at his sleeping daughter. But if he does something that touches her, if this gets ugly and it splashes on her, if there's ever a day she comes home from school crying because some kid said something, because Adrian Cole decided to plant a story, that's the one thing I can't take. That's my whole line. Everything else I'll write out, not that. Then that's where we hold the line, Victoria said. Right there. He doesn't get within a mile of her. I'll build a wall around that child so high and so legal that Adrian Cole couldn't get a rumor through it with a battering ram. She said it with such flat, total certainty that Nathan believed her. You gave me your couch, Nathan. I'll give you the one thing I actually know how to do. I'll make you untouchable. They pulled up outside the apartment. Nathan carried Lily up still asleep and laid her down in her room and pulled the blanket over her and stood in the doorway a second the way he did every night. And when he came back out, Victoria was standing in his living room, looking at the drawings on the refrigerator again, like she couldn't stop. I keep coming back to this, she said, not turning around. This refrigerator. I've closed acquisitions worth more than some countries' GDP, and I stand in a 2-bedroom in Queens, and I can't stop looking at a child's crayon drawings on a refrigerator, and I want to cry, and I don't fully understand why. I think you do understand why, Nathan said quietly. She was silent for a moment. Because no one ever made me feel like I was worth putting on the refrigerator, she said. Is that it? Is that the pathetic little truth of it? That a woman worth $11 billion is standing here jealous of a 7-year-old's crayon drawings because they're evidence that somebody loves her enough to run out of magnets? It's not pathetic, Nathan said. It's the least pathetic thing I ever heard. Everybody wants to be on somebody's refrigerator, Victoria. That's the whole thing. That's the only thing. All the rest of it, the towers, the deals, the magazine covers, people chase all that because they think it'll finally get them onto somebody's refrigerator. And it never does. You can't buy your way onto a refrigerator. You've got to be loved onto one. Victoria turned around and looked at him, and there were tears on her face, and she didn't wipe them away this time. You have to stop, she said, half laughing, half crying. You have to stop saying things like that. I've known you for 18 hours, and you keep taking the top of my head off. Where were you? For 3 years, you were up a ladder in the corner of my building, saying nothing, and I was down the hall marrying the wrong man. And where were you? Right there, Nathan said quietly. In the corner, where I was supposed to be. He held her eyes. It wasn't my place to say anything, Victoria. You were my boss. You were engaged. A man in my position who starts saying things to a woman in your position, that's not a good man. That's a man with an angle. So I kept my mouth shut, and I kept your secrets, and I watched you be lonely, and I told myself it wasn't mine to fix. His voice roughened. Last night was the first time you ever asked. So last night was the first time I got to answer. The apartment was very quiet. Down the hall, Lily slept. The radiator ticked, and the space between them had gotten very small, and both of them were aware of it, and both of them knew that one step in the wrong direction or the right one would change everything in a way that couldn't be changed back. Nathan stepped back. He did it on purpose. He put distance between them, and he saw Victoria register it, and he saw something flicker across her face that might have been disappointment and might have been relief. "You're not going to," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," Nathan said. "I'm not." "Why not?" And there was real hurt in it. Now, the hurt of a woman who has just spent 18 hours discovering what she'd been starving for laid out in front of her and being told she couldn't have it. "Don't tell me you don't. I'm not a stupid woman, Nathan. I read people for a living. Don't stand there and tell me there's nothing here." "I'm not going to tell you that," Nathan said. "There's something here. I'd be lying if I said different, and I'm done lying, even the polite kind." He took a breath. "But here's what I know, Victoria. You ended a 2-year relationship 8 hours ago, on my bathroom floor. You are raw as an open wound, and you are standing in the one place in your whole life where somebody's been kind to you with no angle, and everything in you right now wants to grab onto that and hold it because you're drowning, and I'm the nearest solid thing." He shook his head slowly. "And if I let you do that, if I reach out right now and take what's being offered, then I'm no better than him. I'm just a nicer-looking version of a man who took advantage of the worst night of your life. And in 6 months or a year, when you're standing on your own 2 feet again, you'd look at me, and you'd never quite know. You'd never know if you chose me or if you just grabbed the nearest hand in the dark." Victoria stared at him. The tears had stopped. She was looking at him with an expression that was almost anger and almost awe. "You're turning me down," she said slowly, "to protect me from choosing you too easily." "I'm not turning you down," Nathan said. "I'm telling you to wait. There's a difference, and it's the whole difference in the world." He held her gaze. "If there's something here, really here, not just the wreckage of last night, then it'll still be here in 6 months after you've got your feet under you, after you've stood on your own again, after you don't need anybody's couch to feel safe. And if it's still here, then you can come find me, and I'll be right where I always am, up a ladder in the corner. But you have to save yourself first, Victoria. I can't be your rescue. If I'm your rescue, I'm just the next fortress you hide inside, and you deserve to build your own damn fortress and stand in the middle of it and know it's yours." For a long moment, Victoria didn't say anything. Then she laughed a wet, disbelieving, wondering laugh and pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. "Do you have any idea," she said, "how rare you are? Do you have any idea I have spent my entire adult life surrounded by men who wanted something? Every single one. My father's partners wanted his money. Adrian wanted my company and my name and my smallness. He wanted me small. And every man in between wanted access or influence or a story to tell. And I finally meet a man who could have anything he wanted from me, who I would hand it to, and he looks me in the eye and says, 'Wait.' Says, 'Save yourself first.' Says, 'I won't be your rescue because you deserve to rescue yourself.'" She shook her head. "You're either the best man I've ever met, or you're a lunatic." "Little of both, probably," Nathan said, and she laughed again, and the terrible tension broke, and the room could breathe. "Fine," she said, straightening, wiping her face, gathering herself back into something like composure. "Fine. You want me to save myself. I'll save myself. I happen to be extraordinarily good at saving things. I do it for a living. I restructure failing divisions in my sleep. I'll restructure me." She looked at him. "But I'm going to hold you to it, Nathan Walker. 6 months. I stand on my own, I get my feet under me, and then I come find you. And you'd better be up that ladder." "I'll be up the ladder." "Good." She took a breath. "Now, first order of business in the restructuring of Victoria Harrington is that I am not going to let that man take your job while I find my feet. Those two things are separate. Saving myself doesn't mean letting an innocent man get run over. Where's my phone? I need to call Marcus back." And the strange, charged, tender thing between them folded itself away again, and Victoria Harrington went to work. Sunday, she went into the office. Quiet building, weekend security, the executive floor dark except for one lamp. Marcus was already there when she arrived, and he had files. A lot of files. He'd been at it since before dawn. "Before I show you any of this," Marcus said, "I need you in the right frame of mind, because you're going to be angry, and some of that anger is going to want to point at yourself, and I need you to not do that. What Adrian did, he did. You didn't do it. Being lied to isn't a character flaw. Understood?" "Show me Marcus." He showed her. The 3 things he'd flagged 18 months ago had grown into something much larger, the way small rot does when you leave it in the dark. Adrian Cole had used his advisory position, the position Victoria had given him, over Marcus's objection, because she was in love and wanted to believe, to route 2 of Harrington Global's smaller partnership deals through an intermediary firm. A firm that, when Marcus pulled the ownership 3 layers deep, turned out to be quietly controlled by Adrian himself. He'd been skimming. Not enough to notice in a company that size. That was the genius of it. Small percentages of large numbers, invisible in the noise. But over 18 months, it added up to a figure with a lot of zeros. And every dollar of it had a paper trail. And every piece of that paper trail had Adrian's fingerprints, because he'd never imagined anyone would look. He'd never imagined anyone would look because he'd made sure the one person who might, Victoria, was too busy being made small to lift her head and check. Victoria sat in the quiet office and read it all page by page, and Marcus watched her face go from disbelief to fury to something cold and final. "He was stealing from me," she said. "The whole time he was telling me I was nothing without him. He was stealing from me. Yes, he was making me feel like I couldn't run my own company without him holding my hand. And the reason he needed me doubting myself, the reason he needed me looking down at my feet." Her voice was very steady and very quiet, which Marcus knew was the most dangerous she got. "Was so I'd never look up and see what he was doing. That's my read," Marcus said. The emotional thing and the financial thing weren't 2 separate things. They were the same thing. He needed you insecure to keep you from auditing him. The smaller he made you, the safer his skim. And Victoria understood then, sitting in the dark office, the full architecture of what had been done to her. Nathan had told her the shape of it in the truck. He keeps you looking down at your own feet, so you never look up and see the door. But he hadn't known there was money on the other side of it. He'd just seen the cruelty. Marcus had found the theft, and together the 2 of them, the maintenance man and the lawyer, had shown her the whole machine, a man who'd made her doubt her own competence, not because he was insecure, but because her confidence was the only thing that could catch him. "Marcus," she said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest because you've earned the right, and I've been a fool for 18 months. If I take this to the board tomorrow, the theft, the shell company, all of it, what happens?" "Legally, he's finished. This is fraud, Victoria. Provable, documented fraud against a company he had a fiduciary connection to. This isn't a bad breakup. This is criminal, and the DA would be delighted to have it, because a name like Adrian Cole is a headline conviction." Marcus paused. "But you should understand what he'll do when he sees it coming. A cornered man like that, he'll try to burn everything on his way down. He'll go to the press first before we can, and he'll get his version out. The emotional breakdown story. He'll say you're unstable, that you fabricated all this out of a jealous rage because he left you. He'll say—" Marcus hesitated. He already floated part of it. "I've had 2 calls from reporters this weekend. He's telling people you had a breakdown Friday night, that you disappeared, that you were seen leaving with a member of the building staff." The office went silent. "He's building the story," Victoria said slowly. "That I'm unstable, and that I ran off with a working man to make it sordid. He's going to try to make Nathan the scandal, so that when the fraud comes out, everyone's already decided I'm the crazy woman who slept with the maintenance man and made up lies about her ex." "That's exactly what he's doing," Marcus said. "And Victoria, I have to ask because it matters for how we handle this. The member of the building staff, is there—" "He gave me his couch," Victoria said. "He got me home safe on the worst night of my life, and he gave me his couch, and he put me in his daughter's drawing-covered apartment, and in the morning, he made me eggs and told me to save myself before I let myself lean on anybody, including him. Especially him." She looked at Marcus, and her eyes were bright. That's the scandal Adrian's going to try to sell. That a decent man was decent to me, and I will burn Adrian Cole to the foundation before I let him make Nathan Walker into a punchline. Marcus looked at his boss for a long moment, at the woman he'd watched shrink for 2 years, sitting up straight again, fully herself, fully armed, and pointed for the first time, not at protecting her own fortress, but at protecting someone else. Okay, he said slowly. Then let's talk strategy. Because if we do this right, we don't just beat him. We beat him so completely and so publicly that his version of the story never gets off the ground. The trick is speed, and it's proof. He's selling a story with no evidence. We have a mountain of evidence and no story yet. So we get ahead of him. We go to the board tomorrow morning at 8 before he's had his coffee, and we lay out the fraud cold and documented, no emotion, just paper. And then... Marcus's mouth twitched almost a smile. Then we let the board be the ones who go to the DA. So it's not the scorned fiancé pressing charges. It's Harrington Global's board of directors acting on their fiduciary duty. He can't call that a jealous breakup. It's just business. He'll still go to the press about Nathan. He can go to the press about whatever he wants, Marcus said. But here's the thing about a man who's just been arrested for defrauding a public company. Nobody believes a word he says about anything else. The fraud isn't just how we stop the theft, Victoria. It's how we discredit every other lie in his mouth. Once he's a convicted thief, his story about you and the maintenance man is just the sad noise a criminal makes on his way to the courthouse. Nobody prints it. Or if they do, nobody believes it. Victoria sat back in her chair. For the first time all weekend, something in her shoulders came down from where they'd been braced. You're telling me, she said slowly, that the way I protect Nathan, the way I keep his daughter's name out of any of this, is by moving so fast and so hard on the fraud that Adrian never gets the chance to make him the story. That's what I'm telling you. Then we don't wait for Monday, Victoria said, standing. Reporters are already calling. He's already moving. Every hour we wait is an hour he's out there poisoning the well. She was already reaching for her phone. Get the board on an emergency call tonight, Sunday night. I don't care that it's Sunday night. I have chaired this board for 11 years, and I have never once asked them for an emergency Sunday call, and when I do, they will understand that it matters, and they will get on the phone. She looked at Marcus. And Marcus? The suspension. The maintenance supervisor named Nathan Walker, who got suspended Saturday on an outside complaint. I want that reversed tonight on the record, with a note in the file that the complaint was made in bad faith by a party with a personal conflict of interest. Tonight. Before anything else. Before the board, before the DA, before any of it. Victoria, the man's suspension is the smallest piece of this. No, she said, and her voice was absolutely flat and absolutely certain. It's the most important piece of this. Everything else is about stopping Adrian. That's about doing right by the one person who did right by me. And I am not going to spend one more hour of my life with an innocent man suspended because he was kind to me. Reverse it, tonight. That's not a request. Marcus looked at her, and slowly he smiled, a real one, the first she'd seen from him in a long time. There she is, he said quietly. Been a while. Victoria almost smiled back. Then she picked up her phone, and she made the calls. And Sunday night, the board of Harrington Global, pulled from dinners and golf courses and grandchildren's birthdays, got on an emergency call, and Victoria Harrington, standing at the window of her dark office, looking out over the city she'd built her fortress in, laid it all out. The fraud, the shell company, the paper trail, cold and clean and undeniable. She did not mention Nathan Walker's name once. She didn't have to. His name was already off the suspension list by then. Marcus had seen to it within the hour, a quiet correction to a personnel file in a building in Queens, where a single father was at that very moment reading his daughter a bedtime story with no idea that $11 billion had just moved silently to stand between his little girl and the man who'd wanted to make them small. When the call ended, the board had voted unanimously. Monday morning the matter would go to the district attorney. And the machinery Victoria Harrington had spent her whole life building, the fortress. The empire, the terrible efficient power of it, turned for the first time entirely outward in defense of two people in a two-bedroom apartment who had asked her for absolutely nothing. She stood alone in her office long after the call ended. And she pulled out her phone and she looked at it, and she wanted so badly to call Nathan to tell him it was handled, to tell him he could stop being afraid to hear his voice say something that took the top of her head off. Her thumb hovered over his name, and then she remembered what he'd said. "Save yourself first. I can't be your rescue." And she understood that calling him now tonight, riding the high of it, would be leaning again, would be running to the couch. So instead she put the phone in her pocket, and she turned off the lamp, and she walked out of her tower alone, into the Sunday night, and she drove herself home to the empty 9,000 square foot apartment she'd been afraid of, and she walked into it, and she stood in the middle of all that beautiful emptiness, and for the first time, it didn't frighten her, because she finally understood it wasn't the emptiness that had been the problem. It was that she'd filled it with the wrong man. And now it was empty again, and clean and hers. And she was going to fill it slowly, carefully, on her own terms, with the only thing that had ever mattered, the thing she'd stood in a stranger's kitchen and wept over. She was going to build herself a life worth putting on a refrigerator. Monday morning, Nathan Walker showed up to work at 6 a.m., the way he always did. And the first thing that happened was that Frank found him in the basement mechanical room and told him the suspension was gone. "Gone how?" Nathan said, wrench in his hand, not fully understanding. Gone. Reversed. Came down Sunday night. I got the email at, 10 o'clock near, woke my wife up. Frank shifted uncomfortable, a big, slow, honest man who'd hated making Saturday's call and was glad to unmake it. "And there's a note in the file, Nathan. Official note. Says the complaint was made in bad faith by somebody with a personal conflict of interest. And it's stricken from your record. And there's a line in there. I've never seen a line like it in 20 years of doing this. Says any retaliation against you related to this matter goes straight to the top. To her office. By name." Frank looked at him. "Nathan, what in God's name did you get yourself into this weekend?" Nathan set the wrench down slowly. "Somebody looked out for me," he said. "That's all." "Somebody with an awful lot of pull looked out for you." "Yeah," Nathan said quietly. "She does." He didn't see Victoria that day or the next. He didn't expect to. She'd told him 6 months, and he'd told her to save herself. And he understood that the saving was going to happen up there above him in the world of boards and lawyers and district attorneys, and his job was to keep his head down and do his work and be up the ladder when she was ready. So that's what he did. But the whole building could feel it. Something had shifted at the top. There was a charge in the air, the kind that runs through a place when the powerful start moving. Executives walked faster. Doors closed. There were unfamiliar men in good suits in the lobby, who Nathan pegged from years of watching as lawyers, and then on Wednesday as something else because 2 of them flashed credentials at the security desk, and Nathan had seen enough to know a badge when he saw one. By Thursday it was in the papers, not the version Adrian had wanted. Not the version about an unstable woman and a maintenance man. The other version. Investment executive. Adrian Cole, charged in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Nathan read it on his phone on his lunch break, sitting on an overturned bucket in the mechanical room, and he read the whole thing twice, and there was Victoria's name in it, but not the way Adrian had wanted her name in it. She wasn't the crazy ex. She was the CEO whose board had uncovered the fraud and referred it to prosecutors. Cold, clean, untouchable. Exactly the way she'd built it. There was one line near the bottom that made Nathan set his phone down and sit for a while with his eyes closed. A reporter had apparently asked at some press availability whether there was any truth to Mr. Cole's claims about Miss Harrington's personal conduct and mental state. And the paper printed her answer 3 sentences, and Nathan could hear her saying them in that flat glass boardroom voice that a man facing fraud charges would naturally prefer to talk about anything other than the fraud. That she wouldn't be dignifying his distractions. That the documents spoke for themselves, and the documents were not emotional. She'd done exactly what Marcus said. She'd moved so fast and so hard on the truth that Adrian's lie never got its feet under it, and in doing it, She'd kept Nathan's name and Lily's out of every single word of it. Nobody knew about the couch. Nobody knew about the gray shirt. Nobody knew a 7-year-old had taught a billionaire to press harder with the crayon. It stayed theirs. She'd made sure it stayed theirs. That night, after Lily was asleep, Nathan sat at his kitchen table and thought about calling her. He didn't, because he'd meant what he said. If he called her now in the middle of her triumph, he'd just be one more voice in the roar, and he didn't want to be in the roar. He wanted to be the quiet she came back to when the roar was over. So he put his phone face down on the table, and he did the dishes, and he went to bed. And it was one of the harder things he'd done, leaving that phone face down, because 18 hours with that woman had cracked something open in him that 3 years of watching her from a ladder never had. And he lay in the dark and let himself feel it, and then made himself set it down, the way you set down a heavy thing you're not allowed to carry yet. The weeks turned into a month. Then 2. Victoria kept her word. She didn't call. Nathan would hear things the way you hear things when you're invisible in a building. The executives talked freely around the man fixing the thermostat they always had because they forgot he could hear. And what he heard over those weeks was a company waking up. He heard that she'd started coming to the floor. Not just her office, the floor. The actual floor where the actual work happened. Walking through the bullpen, learning people's names, asking about their kids. One young analyst, not knowing Nathan could hear, told another by the elevator that Ms. Harrington had stopped by her desk and asked how her mother's surgery went, and that she'd been shocked Ms. Harrington even knew her mother had been sick, and that she'd gone home and cried about it in a good way, because in 3 years, nobody up top had ever once seen her as a person. Nathan, changing an air filter 20 feet away, had smiled to himself and said nothing. He heard she'd started therapy. That one came from a different direction. He was fixing a leak in the executive washroom, and Marcus Webb was washing his hands 2 sinks down on the phone with someone, and Marcus said, plainly not caring, that the maintenance man was there. "She's doing the work is what I'm telling you, real work. She told me she's got a therapist now and she's not embarrassed about it. And honestly, the woman I've worked for the last 2 months is the woman I thought I was signing up for 9 years ago. Something got fixed in her." And then Marcus had glanced over and seen Nathan, and something had passed across the lawyer's face, a flicker of recognition of putting something together, and he'd said carefully, "You're Walker, aren't you?" And Nathan had said, "Just fixing the leak, sir." And Marcus had looked at him a moment longer, and then smiled slow and knowing, and dried his hands, and left without another word. Nathan figured after that Marcus knew, and that Marcus wasn't going to say anything, and he was right on both counts. He heard she'd sold the big apartment, the 9,000 square foot one from the magazine. He heard she'd bought something smaller. Still nice, she was still a billionaire, but smaller, a place a person could actually live in instead of echo around. One of the assistants mentioned it by the coffee machine, said Ms. Harrington had donated most of the furniture, said she'd kept almost nothing from the old place, said it was like she was starting over. And Nathan, hearing all of it piece by piece over 8 weeks, felt something in his chest that he didn't have a good word for. Pride wasn't quite it, because he hadn't done any of it she had. But it was close to pride. It was the feeling of watching someone you care about become in real time the person they were always supposed to be. He'd told her to save herself, and from 20 feet away, invisible up a ladder, he was watching her do it, and it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever watched. Lily asked about her constantly. "When's your friend coming back, the sad one, the one who was bad at coloring?" "I don't know, Bug." "Is she still sad?" Nathan thought about it. "No," he said. "I don't think she's sad anymore. I think she's getting happy. It just takes a while sometimes. Getting happy is slower than getting sad." "That's dumb. It should be the other way." "Yeah," Nathan agreed. "It should be, but it's not." Lily made her a drawing anyway, unprompted. Came home from school one day with a folded piece of construction paper and announced it was for the friend, for when she came back, and Nathan should keep it safe. It was a picture of 3 people, a big stick figure, a medium stick figure, with long hair, and a small stick figure, in between them, holding both their hands under a wobbly rainbow. Nathan looked at it for a long time. Then he put it on the refrigerator under a magnet where it stayed. He didn't tell Lily what it meant. He wasn't sure Lily knew what it meant. But he knew. 2.5 months after the night in the rain on an ordinary Tuesday, Nathan was up a ladder in the corner of the 14th floor conference room, replacing a ceiling vent exactly where he'd been the first time he ever saw Victoria Harrington cry. He didn't hear the door open. He was focused on the vent, both hands up over his head, screwdriver in his teeth, and a voice behind him from the doorway said, "You know, I've been trying to figure out how to do this for a week, and it turns out the answer was just to walk down here and find you up a ladder exactly where you said you'd be." Nathan nearly dropped the screwdriver. He came down off the ladder slowly and turned around. And there she was, Victoria Harrington. But not the one from the restaurant, and not the one from his kitchen either. Somebody new. Somebody who stood differently. She was dressed for work, sharp as ever, but the sharpness sat differently on her. Now it was armor she was choosing to wear. Not armor she was hiding inside. Her face was rested. Her eyes. Lily's words came back to him. She has sad eyes even when she laughs. Her eyes weren't sad. That was the whole difference, and it was the difference between a stranger and the person she was meant to be. "Ms. Harrington," Nathan said, because they were in her building and there were rules, and he'd always followed them. "Don't," she smiled. "Don't you dare Ms. Harrington me. Not you. You've seen me eat saved toast off a paper towel in Queens. We're well past Ms. Harrington." "Victoria," he said, and the name still felt like a small, dangerous thing in his mouth. "Hi, Nathan." "Hi." For a moment, neither of them said anything. 2.5 months of not calling stood between them, and neither one knew quite how to cross it. "You didn't call," she said finally. "You told me you'd come find me, when you were ready. I figured showing up on your phone in the middle of everything wasn't finding you, it was just—" He shrugged. "It was just me being one more person wanting a piece of your day. You had enough of those." "I know why you didn't call," she said softly. I'm not accusing you. I'm telling you I noticed that you did exactly what you said you'd do. You told me you'd be right here up a ladder and you'd wait, and you did. Do you have any idea how rare that is? A man who says a thing and then simply does the thing for 2.5 months, asking for nothing, checking on nothing, just being where he said he'd be. Her voice caught just slightly. "I've been testing it without meaning to. Part of me kept waiting for you to break, to call, to show up, to collect. Everyone always collects, Nathan. And you never did. And every week you didn't, I trusted it a little more." "I wasn't testing you back," Nathan said. "In case you're wondering. I wasn't sitting home keeping score. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I was busy being proud of you, from down here. Every time I heard something that you were walking the floor, that you knew people's names, that you sold the big apartment, I'd think, there she goes. There she goes." Victoria stared at him. "You heard all that. People talk around me. They forget I'm there. Always have." He almost smiled. "It's the one good thing about being invisible. You get to watch people become who they really are, and they never know you saw it." "I'm not invisible to you," Victoria said. "That's the thing. That's the whole thing, isn't it? To 400 people, I was a title. To Adrian, I was a possession, an asset, something to keep small and skim off of. And to you, up a ladder in the corner, saying nothing for 3 years to you, I was the only thing I've ever actually wanted to be to anyone." Her eyes were bright. A person. Just a person. The lonely person at the top. You saw her before you knew a single thing about the empire, and you kept her secrets for 3 years, and you never once tried to turn seeing her into getting something. Do you understand that you're the only human being on this earth who's ever done that? Nathan didn't say anything. His throat was too tight. "I did the work," Victoria said. "That's what I came down here to tell you. I'm not here to collect either. Don't worry. I heard you that day in your kitchen. Save yourself first." And I did. I really did, Nathan. I got a therapist. I've been going twice a week, and it's awful. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, harder than any deal, and I've cried more in 8 weeks than in the 20 years before it. I found out things about myself, about my father, about the fortress, about why I let a man like Adrian in and handed him the keys." She took a breath. "I rebuilt the company from the inside, or started to. I'm learning people's names. I'm learning how to be a person people don't just fear. Marcus says I'm someone he recognizes again. I sold the apartment I was afraid of. I bought a place I can actually live in." She looked at him steadily. "I built myself a life, Nathan. A real one. On my own. Standing on my own 2 feet exactly like you said, in a fortress that's finally mine and has no one in it making me small." "Good," Nathan said, and his voice cracked on the one word. "That's Victoria, that's everything. That's exactly it. That's what I wanted for you. I know it is." She took a step closer. "And here's the thing I figured out in all that therapy, the thing that took me 8 weeks and a lot of Kleenex to be sure of. That night in the rain, I was drowning, and you were the nearest hand, and you were right. If I'd grabbed you then, I'd never have known. I'd never have known if I loved you or if I just needed you." She was very close now. "So I let go of the hand, on purpose. I let go and I swam to shore by myself, and I stood up on the sand and I got my breath back, and I built a whole life on that shore without you in it." Her voice dropped. "And Nathan, after all of it, after I didn't need you at all anymore, after I could stand up perfectly fine on my own, I still wanted you. Every day. From all the way across the shore. That's how I know. That's the only way I could have known. Not because you saved me. Because after I saved myself, you were still the person I wanted to walk toward." The conference room was very quiet. It was the same room. The same corner. The same ceiling he'd been fixing the day he first saw her fall apart. And now here she was in the doorway of it. Put back together whole, standing on her own, and choosing freely with nothing. Forcing her hand to walk across the room to him. "You told me to wait 6 months, she said. "It's been 2.5. I'm early. I know I'm early, but I did the whole thing, Nathan. I did it faster than you thought I could because I'm very good at things I put my mind to, and I couldn't. I couldn't wait the extra 3.5 months just to prove a point when the thing is already true." She stopped in front of him. "The thing is already true. So I came to find you. Up a ladder. Where you said you'd be." "Victoria." Nathan's voice was barely there. "You sure? You're really sure? Because once I—" He stopped. "There's no undoing it for me. You understand, I've got a kid. I don't do this halfway. I can't afford to. She can't afford it. So if you're standing here, if you mean it, I mean it. Then I need you to be sure, not lonely sure, not grateful sure, sure. Victoria Harrington looked at Nathan Walker, and she reached up and put her hand flat against his chest over his heart. And she said in a voice with no boardroom in it at all, no armor, no fear, nothing but the person underneath. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life. And I've built an empire on being sure of things." Her eyes were wet and shining and steady. "I don't need you, Nathan. I want you to hear that because it's the most romantic thing I know how to say. I don't need you. I built a life where I don't need anyone. And I'm standing here choosing you anyway, with both feet on the ground, because after everything, after I saved myself exactly like you said, you're still the man I want on my refrigerator." And Nathan laughed, this broken, overwhelmed, disbelieving laugh, and there were tears on his face too now, and he said, "That's Lily made you a drawing. Weeks ago. It's on the fridge. It's 3 people. I didn't tell her what it meant. I didn't know if—" "3 people?" Victoria repeated, and something broke open in her face, joy and grief and disbelief all at once. She drew 3 people, a big one, a medium one, and a little one in the middle, holding both their hands, under a rainbow. Nathan wiped his face with the back of his hand, not caring anymore. "She's been asking about you every day. When's your friend coming back? Is she still sad? I told her getting happy is slower than getting sad. And she made you a drawing of the 3 of us, and told me to keep it safe till you came back." His voice broke completely. "It's been on the fridge for 6 weeks, Victoria. waiting for you. There was already a place for you on the refrigerator. There's been a place for weeks. And that was the thing that undid her. Not the money, not the vindication, not the fortress or the empire, or beating Adrian into the ground. A 7-year-old's crayon drawing of 3 people held safe under a magnet for 6 weeks in a 2-bedroom in Queens, because a little girl had decided there was a place for her before she'd even earned it. Victoria Harrington, the woman who never cried, who'd forgotten how to trust, who'd built a fortress out of fear and called it an empire, put her face against Nathan Walker's chest in the corner of the 14th floor conference room and cried like something that had been locked for 20 years had finally come open. And Nathan wrapped his arms around her, careful and sure the way he did everything, and held on. "There's a place for you," he said quietly into her hair. "There's been a place. You just had to come and take it." "I'm taking it," she said, muffled against his shirt, laughing and crying at once. "I'm taking it. Tell her I'm taking it." "You can tell her yourself." He pulled back just enough to look at her. "Come to dinner. Tonight. It's spaghetti night, which means it's a disaster. There's sauce on the ceiling by the end. She's a menace with a fork. Come be a menace with a fork at my table." "Yes," Victoria said without a half-second's hesitation, this woman who'd spent her whole life managing every gap out of her calendar. "Yes. God, yes. What can I bring?" I don't know what you bring to spaghetti night. I've never been invited to a spaghetti night. What do people bring?" "Just you," Nathan said. "That's the only thing anybody's been waiting for." And Victoria laughed and wiped her eyes, and for the first time since a night in the rain, 2.5 months before the woman. Everyone in the building feared, stood in the middle of her own empire, on her own 2 feet, needing no one, and chose with her whole free heart to go home to a spaghetti dinner in Queens, to a little girl who'd already saved her a place on the refrigerator. The spaghetti dinner was exactly as promised, a disaster, and it was the best night of Victoria Harrington's life. She arrived at 6:30 in the same sharp work clothes she'd worn to find him up the ladder, because she hadn't gone home to change, because she'd been afraid that if she went home and stopped moving, she'd talk herself into being nervous. She stood outside the door of the 2-bedroom in Queens, holding a grocery bag with a loaf of garlic bread and a bottle of sparkling grape juice in it. She'd stood in the aisle for 10 minutes. This woman who negotiated billion-dollar deals, paralyzed over what one brings to a child's spaghetti night, and had finally settled on grape juice because a 7-year-old lived here, and it felt right to bring something the kid could have too. She knocked. The door flew open, and Lily stood there in an apron 3 sizes too big, a wooden spoon in one hand, sauce already somehow on her forehead, and she looked up at Victoria, and her whole face detonated with joy. "You came back!" She dropped the spoon. "Daddy? Daddy, she came back. You said she might, and she did." And the little girl threw both arms around Victoria's waist and held on, and Victoria stood in the doorway with a grocery bag in one hand, and did not know what to do with the other hand for a full second. And then she set the bag down on the floor and crouched down and wrapped both arms around the child and held on just as tight. "I came back," she said into Lily's hair. "I'm sorry it took so long. Getting happy is slower than getting sad. Did you know that?" Lily pulled back and looked at her, deadly serious. "That's what Daddy said. I said it was dumb." "It is dumb," Victoria agreed. "It's completely dumb, but it turns out it's true." "Are you happy now?" Victoria looked past the child to Nathan, who was standing in the little kitchen with a dish towel over his shoulder and an expression on his face like a man watching the thing he'd hoped for come true and not quite believing he was allowed to have it. "Yes," Victoria said. "Yes, I'm happy now." "Good," Lily said, satisfied, and grabbed her hand. "Come see, I made a drawing for you, but Daddy already put it on the fridge. Come see." And she dragged Victoria into the kitchen to the refrigerator and pointed at the folded piece of construction paper that had hung there for 6 weeks. 3 stick figures. A big one, a medium one with long hair, a little one in the middle, holding both their hands under a wobbly rainbow. "That's you," Lily said, pointing at the medium one. "I gave you long hair because you have long hair. And that's Daddy, and that's me, and I'm holding both your hands so nobody gets lost." She looked up. Do you like it? Victoria Harrington stood in the little kitchen and looked at a child's crayon drawing that had been waiting for her for 6 weeks, and she had negotiated with heads of state and stared down hostile boards and built an empire out of nothing but fear and will. And none of it had ever brought her to her knees the way 3 stick figures under a rainbow did. "I love it," she said, and her voice was thick. "Lily, I love it more than anything anyone has ever made me in my whole life. And that's the truth, and I don't say things that aren't true." "You can keep it," Lily said generously. "It's yours. It's always been yours. Daddy said not to give it to anybody else. He said it was saved for you." Victoria looked over the child's head at Nathan, and Nathan looked back, and neither of them said anything, because there wasn't anything to say that the drawing hadn't already said better. Dinner was chaos. Lily was as advertised a menace with a fork. There was sauce on the table and sauce on the child, and by some law of physics, Nathan had never understood in 7 years of spaghetti night sauce on the ceiling. Victoria, who ate lunch alone in a glass office off matching china, sat at a wobbly kitchen table with a paper towel for a napkin and twirled spaghetti badly, and laughed until her sides hurt as Lily demonstrated the correct and highly incorrect ways to eat a meatball. She got sauce on her $400 blouse and did not care. She had never in her life not cared about a thing like that, and she sat there in a stranger's kitchen that was rapidly ceasing to feel like a stranger's kitchen, and she did not care at all. And the not caring felt like the most expensive luxury she'd ever been able to afford. After dinner, Lily insisted on showing Victoria everything. Her room, her books, the specific rabbit she'd had since she was 2, whose name was inexplicably Gerald, and Victoria had laughed so hard at that she'd had to sit down on the edge of the bed, because the only other Gerald she knew held an umbrella outside a building she'd sold. Lily made her read a bedtime story, and Victoria, who read quarterly reports and merger documents and had not read a children's book aloud in her entire adult life, read a story about a bear who couldn't sleep, doing all the voices badly, and Lily corrected her on the voices and made her do them again, and fell asleep halfway through the 3rd attempt with her head against Victoria's arm. Victoria sat very still on the edge of the small bed. A sleeping child leaned against her, the bear book open in her lap, and she looked up at Nathan standing in the doorway, and she mouthed silently, "I don't know what to do." And Nathan came in, and gently lifted his daughter and laid her down and pulled the blanket up, and did the thing he did every night, stood in the doorway for a second looking at her, and Victoria watched him do it and understood that she was watching the single most important thing in this man's life, the thing he'd have burned the world down to protect, and that he was letting her stand in the doorway and watch. They went back out to the living room. Nathan poured 2 glasses of the sparkling grape juice she'd brought, because neither of them wanted anything stronger, because the last time either of them had touched real alcohol was a bottle of wine in a restaurant that had ended a whole life and started a new one, and neither of them wanted to blur a single edge of this night. "So," Nathan said, handing her a glass, sitting down on the old plaid couch, the same couch she'd slept on in his gray shirt on the worst and best night of her life. "You found me up a ladder." "I found you up a ladder." She sat down beside him, not too close, both of them, careful. Both of them aware that after 2.5 months of not touching everything, now was new. "I've been trying to figure out for a week how to do it with any dignity, and there wasn't any dignified way, so I just walked down to the 14th floor, and there you were with a screwdriver in your teeth. You could have called. I could have. But you didn't call me for 2.5 months, and I understood exactly why, and it seemed only right that the person who came to find the other one should be me. You did the hard thing first. You told me to go save myself when everything in you wanted to hold on. So the least I could do was come find you, in person, where you'd have to look at me and know I meant it." Nathan turned the glass in his hands. "Can I ask you something? And you can tell me it's none of my business. After what we've been through, Nathan, there's no such thing as none of your business. Adrian." He said his name carefully. "The papers said charges, but papers don't say the real thing. Is it done? Is he done? Is there any way he comes back around and touches any of this? Because I've got her." He tipped his head toward the hallway. And I need to know if there's a man out there who might—" "He's done." Victoria said it flatly, absolutely, the boardroom certainty back in her voice, but pointed now like a shield instead of a sword. "Marcus handled it exactly right. The board referred it to the DA, so it was never me. It was never the scorned fiancé, it was a company acting on documented fraud. He was arraigned 3 weeks ago. His lawyers are talking about a plea because the paper trail is airtight and everyone knows it. He'll never work in finance again. His name is Poison. And Nathan—" She turned to face him fully. "The thing he wanted to do to us. The story about the unstable woman and the maintenance man. It never landed. Not one paper printed it. Because the moment he became a man facing fraud charges, every other word out of his mouth became the noise a criminal makes on his way down. Marcus called it a week ago. He said nobody believes the arsonist about who started the fire when they catch him holding the matches. So we're safe." She reached over and after a small hesitation put her hand over his on the couch. "You and Lily are safe. Your name was never in any of it. Her name will never be in any of it. I built a wall around that child exactly like I said I would, so high and so legal that man couldn't get a rumor through it with a battering ram, and it held, and it will keep holding because I'm still standing behind it, and I'm not going anywhere." Her voice softened. "That's the one promise I made you in a parking lot 2.5 months ago, before I knew if I'd ever even see you again. That he'd never get within a mile of her. I kept it. I'll keep keeping it, for as long as you'll have me around to keep it." Nathan looked down at her hand on his. Then he turned his hand over slowly and laced his fingers through hers, and it was the first time after everything, after the rain and the couch and the shirt and the ladder. The first time they'd actually held hands, and they both went quiet at how enormous such a small thing could be. "For as long as I'll have you around," Nathan repeated. "Victoria, I've got to be honest with you about something, and I need to say it before this goes 1 inch further, because I said I don't do things halfway, and I meant it." He took a breath. "I'm not going to be able to keep up with your life. You understand. You've got the tower, and the board, and the $11 billion. I fix air conditioners. I'm always going to fix air conditioners, more or less, or something like it. I'm never going to be your equal on paper. And there's going to come a night at some fancy dinner where somebody looks at me and looks at you and does the math out loud, and I need to know you've thought about that, because I have, and it's the only thing that scares me." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she squeezed his hand hard. "Let me tell you what I know about equals," she said. "I was engaged to my equal, on paper. Adrian Cole was my match, powerful, wealthy, respected, a man the magazine said was perfect for me. We were the power couple, and that man spent 2 years making me smaller so he could steal from me, and the night my whole life fell apart, my equal left me alone in a restaurant, and it was the man who fixes the air conditioners who drove through the rain to get me." Her voice was fierce. "So don't you talk to me about equals, Nathan Walker. I had an equal. He nearly destroyed me. You know what you are. You're not my equal. You're my better. You're a better man than every equal I ever met, and I've met all of them. I've had dinner with every powerful man in this city, and not one of them would have given a drunk woman his jacket in the rain and asked for nothing. Not one. You're not below me. You're so far above the men I used to think were my level that it's almost funny. That's not how the world's going to see it." "Then the world can go to hell," Victoria said with such flat conviction that Nathan laughed. "I spent 40 years caring what the world saw. It saw a fortress. It saw an empire. It saw a power couple. And behind all of it, I was the loneliest person in my own building, and one man saw the person before he knew a single thing about the empire. The world's opinion is worth exactly nothing to me now. I've priced it. It's worthless." She looked at him. "Let them do the math out loud at dinner. I'll do it right back. I'll say this is the only man who ever saw me. Match that if you can." Nathan didn't have anything to say to that. He just looked at her. This woman he'd watched from a ladder for 3 years, sitting on his couch holding his hand, telling him he was her better, and he felt something in his chest that had been braced and careful for a very long time, finally let go. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay." He almost laughed. "You win. You're very good at winning. You told me that in a parking lot, too. Okay." And Victoria Harrington leaned her head against Nathan Walker's shoulder, and they sat on the old plaid couch, holding hands and drinking grape juice like two teenagers. And the radiator ticked, and down the hall a 7-year-old slept under a nightlight. And neither one of them said anything for a long time, because there was nothing that needed saying. The months that came after were not a fairy tale, because Victoria had had enough of fairy tales. The fairy tale had been Adrian the power couple, the magazine profile, the beautiful empty life. What came after was better than a fairy tale because it was real, and real things have weight, and weight is what she'd been starving for her whole floating frightened life. She did not sweep in and remake their lives. She'd learned that lesson too. She was done being a fortress that other people hid inside, and she was done building fortresses around other people, even ones she loved. So she moved slowly. She kept fixing herself in therapy. She kept running her company better than she ever had, because it turned out that a CEO who wasn't spending half her strength on being made small by the man beside her had a great deal more strength for everything else. Harrington Global had its best year in a decade, and the analysts wrote it up as strategy and vision, and Victoria let them. And privately, she knew the truth was simpler. She'd stopped being afraid, and a person who isn't afraid can see the whole board. She came to spaghetti night every week. She got better at the fork. She never did get good at the crayon voices, and Lily never stopped correcting her, and it became a thing between them. A ritual the badly voiced Bear Book and Victoria came to understand that being loved was not about being good at things. It was about somebody letting you keep trying to do the voices, even though you were bad at them. It was about there being a place for you at a wobbly table with sauce on the ceiling. It was she finally understood about the refrigerator. She did not move them out of Queens. Nathan wouldn't have it, and she wouldn't have wanted it. Lily's school was there, and Lily's friends, and the whole small warm world Nathan had built with his own 2 hands, and Victoria had spent enough of her life in beautiful empty spaces to know that the wobbly table was worth more than any penthouse. But slowly over a year, over 2, the 3 of them built something in the middle. Not his life, not her life. A third thing. A new thing. A thing that had spaghetti night, and also had sometimes on quiet evenings, Victoria teaching Lily about how a business worked, drawing little diagrams on construction paper, because it turned out the kid had a frightening head for numbers, and Nathan would watch the 2 of them bent over the paper and have to leave the room to get himself together. Nathan kept working. That surprised people who didn't understand him, the ones who found out eventually who Victoria was and assumed he'd quit, and live off her. Why wouldn't he? But Nathan Walker had spent his whole life being the man who fixed the broken things without expecting praise, and he wasn't going to stop being that man just because he'd fallen in love with a billionaire. He liked working. He liked being good at a real thing with his hands. He liked coming home tired to a kid who ran to hug him. He didn't need Victoria's money, and he made that as clear to her as she'd made it clear that she didn't need him. And it became strangely one of the truest things between them, that they were 2 people who did not need each other at all, and who chose each other anyway every single day freely out of want instead of need. He did eventually let her help send Lily to a better school, because that was for Lily, not for him, and doing right by Lily beat his pride every time. But he kept his job, and he kept fixing broken things, and Victoria loved him more for it, not less. They married quietly eventually. No 400 guests. No vendors, no magazine, no power couple photograph. A small ceremony in a park with chain-link fences, the same park, in fact, where a billionaire in borrowed sweatpants had once watched a 7-year-old score a goal and cheered with her whole chest. Marcus Webb came and cried and told anyone who'd listen that he'd known before either of them did. Mrs. Alvarez came and sat in the front and squeezed Nathan's arm the way she had the night he'd asked her to sit with Lily at midnight. And Lily, 9 years old by then, and still always a menace, was the one who walked Victoria down the makeshift aisle holding her hand, because she'd decided years ago that her job was to hold both their hands so nobody got lost, and nobody had ever given her a reason to stop. At the small reception afterward, Someone, a cousin of Nathan's, a little drunk, a little tactless, did exactly the thing Nathan had feared. Looked at the two of them, the maintenance man and the billionaire, and did the math out loud. Said something with a laugh about how Nathan had done all right for himself, hadn't he, landing a woman like that? And before Nathan could even stiffen, Victoria set down her glass, and she smiled the smile that had ended 100 boardrooms, and she said, clear and warm and absolutely lethal, "You've got it backwards. I'm the one who did all right. I had every powerful man in this city, and every one of them wanted something from me." This man drove through a rainstorm to get a stranger home safe and asked for nothing. Do you know how rare that is? I built an empire and I still couldn't buy it. I had to be lucky enough to have a flat tire on the worst night of my life and find out the only person who'd answer was the one who never wanted a thing from me. She lifted her glass. So no, he didn't do all right landing me. I did the deal of my life landing him, and I don't lose deals. The cousin didn't have anything to say. Nobody ever did. And that, in the end, was the whole truth of it, the thing Victoria Harrington had crossed a whole desert of a life to learn. Nathan had never been her hero. He'd told her that himself that first strange morning without saying the words, "I won't be your rescue." He never once saved her. He drove through the rain and gave her his jacket and his couch and his old gray shirt, and then when she was drowning and would have grabbed onto him and never let go, he did the hardest, kindest, rarest thing a person can do for someone they love. He let go of her hand and told her to swim to shore herself. And she had. She'd learned to stand on her own 2 feet in a fortress that was finally truly hers, with no one in it making her small. And only then, only after she needed no one at all, did she walk back across the shore and choose him. That was the difference. That was everything. She didn't love him because he saved her on the worst night of her life. She loved him because after the worst night was over and the fraud was buried and the empire was thriving and she was standing perfectly well on her own, he was still the same man. The man who packed his daughter's lunch and cut the crusts off because someday she'd stop asking. The man who fixed broken things without needing to be thanked. The man who'd watched the loneliest person in a building full of people and kept her secrets for 3 years and never once turned seeing her into taking from her. The world had spent 40 years seeing Victoria Harrington's success and never once seeing her heart. And a man up a ladder in the corner had seen her heart before the world ever showed him her success, and that she finally understood was the person who changes your entire life. Years later, there was a refrigerator in a house that was a little bigger than the old 2-bedroom, but not much because they'd never wanted much. And it was covered edge to edge, magnet over magnet, in a child's drawings, and then a teenager's, and then taped up next to a college acceptance letter. One very old, very faded piece of construction paper. 3 stick figures under a wobbly rainbow. A big one, and a medium one, with long hair, and a little one in the middle, holding both their hands, so nobody would ever get lost. It had hung on every refrigerator they'd ever owned. Victoria had made sure of it. It was the single most valuable thing she owned, and she owned a great deal, and she'd have burned all the rest of it to the ground before she let anything happen to that one crayon drawing. Because a woman worth $11 billion had once stood in a stranger's kitchen and wept over a child's drawings, jealous of the plainest, cheapest, most priceless thing in the world. The evidence that somebody loved you enough to run out of magnets. And she had spent the rest of her life making sure that fridge never had an empty inch on it, that they always ran out of magnets, because she had learned the one lesson that all the money and all the power and all the fortresses in the world could never teach her, that you cannot buy your way onto anyone's refrigerator. You have to be loved onto one. And she had been. Freely and completely and forever, by a man who never saved her, and a little girl who saved her a place before she'd even earned it. Victoria Harrington. The woman everyone once feared had finally stopped being afraid, because she had finally, after a lifetime of building empires to keep from being made small, found the 2 people who only ever wanted to help her stand tall. And she never let go of them again.